Hi Laura, thanks so much for joining us on Britain's Birth Stories podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. And do you mind telling us a bit about yourself, like where you're based and who's in your family?
Absolutely. So I'm based in Glasgow and I have a 14-month-old son called Sam and I live with my husband Stephen. And we've got a stubborn bulldog as well.
Oh, lovely. All right, and what's your profession apart from taking care of your family?
So I am a yoga studio owner and more recently a postnatal doula. So I've been teaching yoga for a number of years now, but this year during lockdown I did my doula training. So I'm excited to be moving into doula work.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. I'm sure we'll get back to that after. Great. So, let's get straight into your pregnancy. Was that something you'd thought much about, or was that unexpected?
Yeah, so I had been wanting to have children for years, actually. So I was so excited when I found out that I'd fallen pregnant. Yeah, it was just, it was planned and very exciting.
Oh, amazing. And had you thought much about birth at that point?
Before falling pregnant, no, I hadn't really thought that much about birth, but during my first trimester, I really went on a bit of a deep dive because once I realised that I was pregnant, I was like, oh gosh, okay, the baby will have to come out somehow, and I don't know anything about that. So one of the things the sort of ways that I cope with uncertainty is reading and gathering information. So I did a lot of reading up about it.
Wonderful. And did you know how and where you'd like to give birth?
Well, initially when I started doing my research, I kind of toyed with having a home birth. But because it was my first and we sort of knew that the rates of transfer to hospital was quite high for your first birth. I think it was something like, I forget, is it 45% or 55%, something around that mark. Yeah. We decided to opt for birthing in our nearest midwife-led unit. So that was a plan anyway, and to have a fairly sort of hands-off natural water birth.
Wonderful. And how was your pregnancy for you?
I would say on the whole I didn't enjoy being pregnant. Right. I just found it quite an uncomfortable experience. I guess I suppose just all the changes in my body. I'm used to being like very active and physically like doing quite a lot of sport and exercise, and I think I found that slowing down actually quite challenging. I had a bit of pelvic girdle pain and sort of swelling in my feet and legs, and all the kind of usual things. I suppose everyone experiences some symptoms to more greater or lesser extent, but yeah, and it turns out that Sam was actually a really big baby because when he was born he was 10 pounds 10.
Wow.
So I think that some of like the discomfort, and now I'm like, oh, I understand why I was so uncomfortable and those last couple of months because he was just so massive. But also I was obviously like very excited about having the baby and getting to meet Sam, and I sort of enjoyed that nesting process, and even planning for the birth I quite enjoyed. We did like hypnobirthing, and I enjoyed all of that process, kind of learning about it, but just at a physical level I found it quite hard.
Yeah. Well, now let's get straight into it. How did labour begin for you, and how did it progress?
So I was induced. I waited and tried everything in the book
Yeah.
to try to start labour, but it just was not happening. So I think I waited 2 weeks and then went into hospital to be induced. I was just, like I say, he was a big baby. I was just like, I was ready just to get the process moving.
Yeah.
Couldn't really wait any longer than that. So it took, went into hospital on a Sunday. I got my first pessary, I think it was about tea time on Sunday, and then I think I maybe had to have about 2 more pessaries. And then things started, then my contractions started probably like in the middle of the night. And I was lucky actually that I had my own room, which was nice. My husband went home to get some rest. And we had a birth doula, so sort of early on the Monday morning, I called both my husband and our doula, and they both came in to join me.
Wow.
Oh, you just cut out there.
Oh,
can you hear
sorry.
me?
Yeah, I could hear you. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Okay, so you called the doula in, and then what went on from there?
So the contractions were really quite close together, and they were very intense, very strong, and it's kind of a bit of a blur in terms of the timeline, but that went on for a while, and I was struggling a little bit to feel in control, and then I was also struggling with like internal examinations. For some reason, I just found them like incredibly painful.
Yeah.
So they had to, because at this point I wasn't in the labour ward yet, so they had to actually bring up gas and air for me just to get the internal examination to see how far dilated I was. And the next time they checked, I think I was still only something like 2 centimetres, and I really expected to be further along because the contractions were like really strong and really close together. And so then they spoke about possibly breaking my waters to get things kind of moving along a bit quicker. But that kind of gave me the heebie-jeebies a bit. I just had this like visions of like a long knitting needle. I was like, oh God, no, I can't cope with that. So I was like, okay, let's just kind of see what happens. And so my doula went away to take a wee break, and we decided that I would go and like have a little seat in the bath. And did that, but then it sort of started to slow things down again. I kind of felt actually the more relaxed I was, the more spaced out the contractions were. And then got out of the bath again, and my waters broke, and there was meconium in the waters, which wasn't really surprising, really, considering kind of what stage of pregnancy I was at. You know, he'd been in there for a while. So at that point, they decided, of course, like getting into the midwife-led unit went out the window as soon as I decided that I was getting an induction, or that was that overdue. So once they saw that there was meconium in the waters, they wanted to get me down to the labour ward. And at this point, I think I'd just had gas and air for the examinations, but not for anything else. But it just like everything really ramped up, and I just remember like really like this death grip on my husband's hand every time a contraction came. I just like couldn't focus on anything else apart from squeezing him.
Oh my goodness!
And so then it felt like it took ages to actually get down to the labour ward, and I remember that quite strongly, like asking, like, when can I go down? Because I knew that once I was down there, then I would have like more access to different pain relief. Which is funny because like all throughout my pregnancy, I was like, I'm going to have this natural birth and don't want to use any pain relief. But I think the reality of it and the sort of intensity of I don't know if it would have been different had it not been an induction, but certainly I felt like I needed some extra help. So then, and also the other thing which I hadn't really realised is that they want to do the continuous fetal monitoring for the heartbeat. But I feel like the contraption they use almost seems a bit not fit for purpose, because it didn't really fit around my bump properly. I don't know if it's the shape of my bump, but it kept like falling off, and they kept having to like fiddle around with it. And when I was getting these strong contractions, like the last thing that I wanted was someone like fiddling around with the bump constantly. And so they kept sort of being concerned because they couldn't like keep that that sort of consistent track of his heart rate. So then we decided to get what's the thing called where they like pop something in the baby's scalp to keep a track of
the what's it called? Oh, it's not a balloon. It's something like that. It's
like I can't remember what it is. But we decided to go for that because I just like couldn't cope with them constantly like messing around with this belt. So when we got down to the labour ward, they fitted that, and then I think I decided. So then they examined me again, and I still wasn't that far dilated. So they said that they could put me on the hormone drip again, just to kind of move things along, and I just couldn't face going on the drip and things getting even more intense without any sort of pain relief. So at that point I decided to get an epidural. And I think this was, so if you think it started on Sunday tea time, this is probably around Monday tea time, going into Monday evening. And so I got the epidural, and I was just so relieved.
Oh wow.
Just sweet relief, So I was kind of labouring all night and still not really. I think by about 4 o'clock in the morning, I think it was still only about 6 centimetres.
Right.
And Sam wasn't in any distress, but at this point I was just so exhausted, and it just didn't feel like we were getting anywhere. So then we decided to opt for the emergency C-section because I was just kind of ready for it to be over, and felt quite good about that actually. At the time it was all very calm, it happened quite quickly, but it was amazing actually just to think that these people were just waiting on standby, and before I knew it, we were just in theatre and everyone was in their places, and it was just, it was great.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And what was the first few hours like with him?
Good. I mean, I actually can't remember that much about it. I think probably just because I was so tired, but we were in recovery. Sam latched on fine, and then we got wheeled up to our ward. I think my husband had to go away for a couple of hours. I couldn't leave the bed because I had the catheter, so I think I was probably getting quite a lot of support from the midwives at that point. Probably just starting to dawn on me what major surgery having the C-section was. So just kind of obviously not being able to leave the bed, and then when I could leave the bed, only just being able to shuffle around.
And what were your thoughts on feeding at that point?
Well, I knew that I wanted to breastfeed, and I think I just remember not really knowing if I was doing it right, and it being quite painful. And just calling the midwives at every opportunity, just to be, can you check his latched on properly, or not really understanding, I suppose, why it was sore.
And how did that progress for you?
Well, what I did was, I think maybe just as I got home, so we stayed in hospital for a couple of days and then got home he was born on the Tuesday. We went home on Thursday, and I booked an appointment with a lactation consultant. She came out on the Monday because I just didn't really feel that confident with the feeding, and I sort of felt it was something not quite right, but I didn't really know what. So I mean, the feeding journey, it's kind of a long story, but basically, at that first appointment, she suggested that Sam might have thrush because he had a white tongue and it wasn't kind of like rubbing off easily. And so that sort of sent us on a bit of what felt like, now looking back, a bit of like a wild goose chase, like trying to sort out the thrush. But it turns out that that's not what it was. It was because he had a tongue tie and his tongue just like wasn't moving enough to like clean his tongue. So we did manage to get his tongue tie cut. I think he was maybe about 3 weeks old. We went privately to get that done. And then it took a good few weeks even after it was cut for the feeding to get easier. So he was really like fussy at the breast. It was painful for me. He was upset. I was upset. We were like worrying about this thrush thing for weeks. The swabs kept coming back negative at the doctors, but for some reason they were like insistent that that's what it was and kept prescribing all this medication. So, so I would say we had a bit of a rocky start to breastfeeding, but I think it probably took, to be honest, about the first 3 months for us to feel like it had gotten easier. I'm really glad that we stuck with it, and I'm like so proud of myself actually for not giving up. And I mean, I'm quite a stubborn person, so that probably accounts for a lot of it. But it was worth it in the end.
Oh, and how was life postnatally for you personally?
I would say the first 3 to 4 months were quite rocky for me. So we obviously had the feeding issues, but I guess I wasn't really prepared for life after a C-section. I didn't really know what that would be like because it wasn't part of my birth plan. I mean, having a big baby to care for, like, he always just kind of felt like he was quite heavy. And he wanted to be held and rocked and bounced all day long. And my husband went back to work. I think maybe Sam was about 4 weeks old when he went back to work. And then at that point, I think, the first 4 weeks, I think, were a bit easier because I had more people around. And then after he went back to work, I think then it got really tough because he was out of the house for about 10 hours a day, and Sam had colic, which I'm not really sure what the cause was, but he basically used to cry for hours on end. And I'm laughing now, but it really wasn't funny. This is probably a way of coping with it, but so he used to cry for hours on end, and because I was so sore recovering from the C-section, I couldn't walk very far. So, and I also couldn't carry him in a baby carrier for very long. And also live on the first floor, and we didn't really get a very light pram, so I couldn't carry the pram up and down the stairs. So actually, sometimes I just couldn't really leave the house. So I would say the fourth trimester for me was a bit grim, to be honest, and that's what's kind of prompted me to train as a postnatal doula, because I don't want other women to go through that if they don't have to. And it's funny because I think in our society we very much place a focus on buying things. When you're pregnant, it's all okay, what pram are you going to get? What travel system are you going to buy? What, I don't know, what baby Bjorn bouncer are you going to buy? And I did all this research and stuff. But I think it was just when Stephen went back to work, I was feeling completely overwhelmed. I spent about £200 on this fancy baby rocker thing. It was like this electrical thing, which is supposed to mimic like the movements that you do if you're holding them. Because I was like, I cannot carry this baby all day long. So I convinced my husband to buy this, and it's like this really big, ugly contraption. And Sam just like wasn't interested in it at all, and I just felt so disheartened.
Yeah.
But looking back, I think, gosh, why didn't I just think, okay, if I've got £200 to spare, why don't I just hire a doula or someone who can come and like hold my baby for a couple of hours whilst I eat lunch and have a shower? But it just didn't occur to me, and I suppose I'm not sure I really knew. Obviously, I had a birth doula, but I'm not sure I really knew about the sort of support that was available postnatally to me. And again, it was just that sort of emphasis on buying things rather than realising that I could actually invest in getting help in the form of a person, more personal care. So, if I could go back and speak to myself a year ago, I would definitely suggest that. So, again, that sort of ties in with what I'm offering now.
Yeah. No, that was a great transition into your professional life and where you're located now. Do you feel like postnatal doulas are popular?
No. So at the moment, there aren't many postnatal doulas around. It's not really something anyone's heard of. So I think that I feel like we need to have a bit of a shift in how we view the postnatal period. And I feel like there's very much an emphasis on this kind of bounce back culture and like, you know, getting out and going to the baby classes and then fitting into your jeans again. And actually, I think taking a more of a slow approach to recovery and that fourth trimester is so valuable. And in a culture that focuses very much on doing rather than just being, I think, that we need to see more of a shift in that. So I'm hoping that with the kind of message that I'm spreading, and I know that there's definitely another couple of postnatal doulas that have just recently started working in Glasgow, that we can help kind of spread that message and be part of that shift in attitude towards how we view the postpartum period.
Great. And you mentioned you did your training during lockdown. How was that for you?
Yeah, it was really good actually. I trained with Mars and Lorna from Abuela Doulas.
Wonderful.
And I was really grateful actually to be able to do it online, because usually they would do it in person, and I think in London or Birmingham, but because of the lockdown that we were in, that made it accessible for me, because it would have been like difficult to travel with Sam being so little, and it was really lovely to connect with the group that were also doing the training, and we're still in touch as well with the other people, the other doulas. So it's nice to have that support network.
Oh, that's amazing. And I think although you said they may not be popular yet, postnatal doulas, that's also something you can use to your advantage for you to start leading the way in that area.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, to me, I see a lot of the work initially to be about like educating people, to, like I say, to see and think about that postpartum period as well, because I feel like a lot of the time the focus is on birth.
Yeah.
And I understand why that is, and I was exactly the same during my pregnancy. All I could think about is the birth, but actually I think it's just as important to have a postnatal plan as it is to have a birth plan. So I'm excited to be doing this work.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing everything about your experience.
You're very welcome. I love speaking about it. So thanks for inviting me.